Friday night on Smackdown was opening night for the 2019 WWE Draft. Night 2 is coming up on Raw tomorrow night. In-ring wise, there was some good stuff on Friday, and the full heel turn of Bayley at the end, which was great. As a draft show, and as a show overall, I thought it sucked. And the wildcard rule is a very big part of why. Seeing people drafted to shows that they've already been on for months, were it not for that stupid rule, it might have had a little more oomph to it, but the way they did the whole thing, having to watch these, and I don't even know if they were actual Fox executives or not, having to watch these Fox and these USA Network executives in their respective war rooms celebrating over people like Natalya and the Lucha House Party was some of the most cringeworthy cornball television that I have seen all year. Twitter poll had over 3,000 votes, 41% thumbs up, 59% thumbs down. Final numbers are not in yet, but the show lost about 1 million viewers from the Fox premiere. I mean, I knew it would be down from the premiere, but that's a steep drop. They did 3.8 million the week before, down to 2.8 million on Friday. Again, these were the preliminary numbers. I guess the final numbers will be out tomorrow. But that's 1 million people, almost 1 million people, who said, peace out, I've seen enough. But they held strong in the all-important 18 to 49 demo. In fact, nothing else on network television even came close to what SmackDown did in that demo on Friday night. And it was still, and this is important to keep in mind, besides the demo stuff, which I have to point out, but it's also important to keep this in mind too. For all the wrestling that we have every single week on TV, on YouTube, and all the different ways people can watch wrestling now, SmackDown, even if, like me, you thought overall the show was no good, it was still the most watched wrestling show all week long. Bigger than Raw, and way bigger than AEW or NXT. So everything is relative. You can say that, they lost almost 1 million viewers. They did, but, and this would be kind of the other side of the coin that you have to point out, it wasn't all doom and gloom. Because the network is going to look at those demos and say, okay, hey, we were number one for the night in this demo, and let's try to work on other areas. But like I said, I expected a drop, just like I expected a drop for AEW. That's not good to lose that many people in 1 week. The press release that WWE put out earlier in the day on their website about the draft, listing all the eligible names, turned out to be a spoiler on the draft order. I would say a good 97% of the order, as it was listed, played out exactly that way on television. And there were eligibility pools for each night of the draft. That's why the champions like Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar were not drafted, because it would have made no sense not to draft them if you were Fox or USA executives, but they were not eligible on Friday night. They will be eligible on Raw tomorrow night. At least they explained that. No NXT involvement at all this year in the draft. They had war rooms set up with people they claim were executives from Fox and USA Network who would celebrate after each pick. They would pump their fist in the air. They would scream and cheer and holler and jump up and down. You would think that the ball had dropped and it was New Year's Eve. And that's fine if you're drafting Roman Reigns or Bray Wyatt to your show. But again, when they got to people like Natty, to show these people wetting themselves is completely preposterous. And it is so hokey and over the top that any chance of this really coming off and making it feel more real and more genuine just went right out the window. Because who could possibly look at that and take any of this shit seriously? In the Fox War Room, they had someone in costume as the Fox NFL Sunday robot, high-fiving people after each pick. The robot should have been eligible. The Robot against The Fiend. That's a money feud. I'll take the Robot over Seth Rollins in there against Bray Wyatt. So for every 2 picks that SmackDown got in the draft, Raw would get 3. Since Raw is 3 hours and SmackDown is only 2, so I guess 1 pick for each hour. They had cut-ins throughout the show with all the Fox Network stars and all the Fox Network analysts, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman in the booth. They had them record some stuff. Joe Buck was instantly the biggest heel on the show the moment they showed him on screen. Got boos in the building. And it gave me great pleasure watching him have to shill for WWE because you know that he was dying on the inside having to do that. You know that people like Joe Buck and people like Colin Cowturd, who for years would say the stupidest shit and the most disrespectful things, more so Colin. I don't know that Joe Buck has ever said anything disrespectful about wrestling. I could have sworn he may have made like an offhanded comment once. I don't get the sense he's a very big wrestling fan, not of the current product anyway, so that's why I say I'm sure he was dying a little bit on the inside. But someone like Colin Cowherd, who has said some really stupid, offensive shit on his show over the years when it comes to wrestling and the death of Eddie Guerrero and some of the other things as well. And now to see him hobnobbing with the WWE stars and putting over WWE. Oh, it's great. I mean, it's nauseating, but it's great to have to see them sell their soul and do that. Because you know on the inside they're just dying a little bit each day that they have to do it. But that's part of the Fox family synergy now. They all have to put over pro wrestling, whether they like it or not. So they went to the other analysts and they had, I think, I forgot the other names. It's the people that you would see on Fox NFL Sunday and shows like them. I think Strahan maybe was in there, Terry Bradshaw, and they're talking about their favorite stars, and they're talking about people from 30 and 40 years ago. They're putting over Bruno Sammartino and Dusty Rhodes and Andre the Giant and Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, all names from decades ago. And I get that a lot of them are old enough that those are the names they would have known when they were that young or that they grew up on, maybe when they used to be big wrestling fans. I understand that. But boy, does it make this current generation of stars from the last 5, 10, 15 years look like a bunch of chumps. So these were the Monday Night Raw picks in the order in which they were selected. Going to Monday Night Raw, Becky Lynch, who is the Raw Women's Champion, AJ Styles, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, so the entire OC kept together. Drew McIntyre. And I will say this, if they are done with Rollins and The Fiend, and you would never think so based on what they did on Friday, but I'll talk about The Fiend here in a second. But with this split and The Fiend going somewhere else, if they are done with that feud, McIntyre, I think, should be next in line to go after the Universal title. If not now, then when? They keep saying, he's got world champion written all over him. I've been hearing this for 2 years. I mean, how much longer are they going to wait? Randy Orton now back on Monday Night Raw. Ricochet, Bobby Lashley, Alexa Bliss. Kevin Owens is back on Monday Night Raw after working so hard to rid SmackDown of Shane McMahon now for months and then beating Shane and firing him on television. Kevin Owens gets drafted to Monday Night Raw. And I said this on Twitter. I saw Bruce Mitchell told me that I wasn't being helpful by tweeting this, but so, you can blame me if this happens. In a swerve, Shane McMahon reemerges on Monday Night Raw, having been fired from SmackDown, and proceeds to feud with Kevin Owens for another 6 months. Now, I know they said that he was fired from WWE, but this is WWE. I mean, come on now. I would say the majority of people listening to this show right now have every expectation that Shane McMahon at some point soon is going to end up on Monday Night Raw. So get ready. This feud may not be over yet. For what it's worth, Owens tweeted that WWE's digital team asked him for his thoughts on being drafted to Raw. He said that he gave them a very honest, heartfelt answer, and they decided against posting the footage because, in their view, he appeared to be angry. He says he was angry. He still is angry about being drafted in the 3rd round. Looks like I still have lots to prove, he said. Now that came off to me as storyline, but I wouldn't doubt if he was upset about being so low in the draft and bumped back over to Monday Night Raw after having established himself as a babyface, one of the bigger babyfaces on that SmackDown brand. SmackDown clearly now is going to be the A show. I think we can basically, going forward, Monday Night Raw is no longer the A show. The A show now is SmackDown. The A show is on Fox. And I don't mean in terms of quality necessarily, but just in terms of how important the show is and how they position it. For the first time, I would say, since 2003, SmackDown is back to being the A show in WWE. So I don't doubt that Owens might actually feel that way and might be upset that he was drafted back to Raw. He might feel like he isn't fully being appreciated for what he brings to the table. The silver lining is that had he stayed on SmackDown, with Brock Lesnar being the WWE champion, he would not have sniffed the top title on that brand. On Raw, at least he has a shot at some point to wrestle for the championship. Maybe even win it. That's assuming that Brock doesn't get drafted back over to Raw tomorrow night. Other names going to Raw. Natalia, which the Fox Network executives, or USA, I should say. Well, Fox, maybe they were happy. They were happy to not pick her. I don't know. But boy, they were celebrating. They were popping some of the bubbly, like this was such a big deal. So Cat Lady is coming to Raw, the Viking Raiders, Nikki Cross, and the Street Profits. And here's my question about the Street Profits. Were they drafted to actually wrestle? Or were they drafted to just continue to do cornball comedy on TV? Because each week that I see the Street Profits on Raw, I actually see them getting less over as the weeks go on. So I think it's about time they get in the ring and show us what they got there. Now, SmackDown. Here are the SmackDown picks in the order in which they were selected. Roman Reigns, the number one pick on SmackDown. Bray Wyatt is now on SmackDown Live, and that's important to note because in the graphic that they showed on screen, they showed Mr. Rogers looking Bray Wyatt. They called him Bray Wyatt. They did not call him The Fiend. Michael Cole made a comment about, well, I guess where Bray Wyatt goes, so goes The Fiend. But The Fiend was not drafted to SmackDown. Bray Wyatt was drafted to SmackDown. Now, this might explain why he didn't win the championship at Hell in a Cell. Again, this does not excuse the finish they did at the pay-per-view. I don't want to hear that from people either. Well, you see, in the end, it all makes sense. The fans got it wrong because if Bray was going to go to SmackDown, it wouldn't make any sense for him to win the Universal title. Hey, numbnuts, I got a better question for you. What sense would it make to do that match in the first place if you knew you weren't going to put the championship on him? Why even book the match? Don't make excuses for them. Don't make excuses for bad booking. I don't want to hear it. Sasha Banks is now on SmackDown, and you know what that means. It's boss time. It's boss time again. They got Roman Reigns and Sasha Banks on SmackDown with Michael Cole. So now Michael Cole can go crazy every single week with the big dog and boss time. I thought we might get away from that. Apparently not. Sasha, by the way, she must be okay after her Hell in a Cell match because they've announced that she's going to be in the ring facing Becky Lynch one final time tomorrow night on Raw. Braun Strowman, now on SmackDown. Lacey Evans, which is great. This is awesome. You know why? Because that means no more feuding between Lacey and Natty. It is officially over. The Revival on SmackDown. That ends the alliance between Randy Orton and the Revival since Orton went to Raw. Lucha House Party is on SmackDown. And Heavy Machinery, Otis and Tucker, are on SmackDown. There is a list of people who went undrafted on Friday night. These are now considered to be free agents. These are the people who were not drafted by either Fox or USA. Cesaro went undrafted. Natty was drafted. Heavy Machinery was drafted. The Lucha House Party was drafted. The Street Profits haven't even had a match yet. They got drafted. They were all drafted, and Cesaro was not. Now, if he's considered to be a free agent, he should be allowed to sign with NXT. And I hope that's the idea behind this. Maybe this is an angle they're going to turn it into. Fox and USA executives, they don't appreciate him, and so he decides, you know what, I'm going to take my talent somewhere that will be appreciated. And he goes to NXT, or even NXT UK. That's where I hope this is going. Chad Gable, who's been getting a little bit of a push on TV, he lost again to King Corbin on Friday. Chad Gable went undrafted. This guy went to the finals of the King of the Ring tournament. Former Olympian. Been getting a lot of TV time. Fans get behind him. Undrafted. Humberto Carrillo, Akira Tozawa, Sin Cara, Eric Young. I forget Eric Young is still employed. Heath Slater, Drew Gulak, the B Team, Tamina, and EC3. All undrafted. You know what? If EC3 is a free agent, he should sign with Impact. The only place that ever truly appreciated him. Let him go back to Impact. And actually, as I am sitting here, I was just checking WWE.com. And sure enough, because I thought this might happen, sure enough, I don't know when this was posted, but they now have an update. many of the names I just mentioned have now been drafted. They're so inconsequential, they just pushed a little update out online. Oh, by the way, these names have now been drafted. So here's the update on some of the names I just mentioned. Apollo Crews, he goes to SmackDown. Drew Gulak to SmackDown. EC3, unfortunately for him, back to Raw. Sorry, buddy. Eric Young to Raw, Heath Slater to SmackDown, Sin Cara to Raw, Tamina to SmackDown, and the B Team to SmackDown. That means that all of the names I just mentioned have now been drafted. Cesaro, still undrafted. Chad Gable, still undrafted. Maybe they will be by the time you listen to this. But as of now, they are still undrafted, which tells me this has to be part of an angle, at least with Cesaro. It's got to be a storyline. He's got to go to NXT or NXT UK. That is the only possible outcome here that makes any sense. For Eric Young to be drafted to Raw, for EC3 to be drafted to Raw, and Cesaro not to be, got to be a storyline. As for the show itself, there was a sign in the crowd that said WWE is redneck anime.